Story 1. I had stage 4 testicular cancer that spread to my lungs. I endured chemotherapy, a lung biopsy, removal of my right testicle, and removal of a portion of my right lung. I have been in remission for 6 years, although I can still feel the effects of the surgeries and chemotherapy. Thank you for the sympathy, but I am fine. I live a mostly normal life now. I graduated from high school and college. I have a good job, and I continue to serve my community. Story 2. A 6-centimeter Bartholin abscess. The gauze was removed from the drained wound a week and a half later, once nerve tissue had begun to regrow through it. Story 3. For me, it was when I had multiple ear infections and both of my eardrums ruptured. It felt like someone had taken a power tool to my ear canal and tried to perform a lobotomy. Story 4. I passed a kidney stone while in labor with my first child. I thought I was dying. Story 5. I had minor surgery on my anus. You have no idea how many things on your body are connected to your anus. I coughed and wanted to slam my hand in a car door as a distraction from the pain. Story 6. I had what I thought was a cyst in my armpit. It was driving me nuts, very swollen and painful, and I needed quick relief, so I decided to pop it. It was not a cyst. It was a hidradenitis suppurativa lesion, meaning a sweat gland was inflamed, and I popped it open. That was traumatizing. I broke a toe once while intoxicated, and the day after I removed the cast, I dropped a heavy iron pan on it and broke it again, this time sober. It was painful, but my body shut down. I felt the pain and my blood pressure dropped quickly, so I fainted immediately after. Story 7. Undetected intestinal worms for 3 months. Please do not ask me to define the pain. Story 8. Alcohol withdrawal. I am sober now, but that was a living nightmare. My whole body hurt. Tremors, vomiting, and hallucinations. Imagine the worst flu, 10 times worse. Story 9. I dislocated my left knee in 2023. The popping sound was quite unpleasant. Story 10. I was hit in the left testicle playing baseball in college. It was unbearable. I had to have it surgically removed. 30 years later, my friends still call me half-sack. Story 11. I am currently dealing with this. I fully respect what others have gone through and would not want to minimize someone else's struggle. I have 7 kidney stones. 3 of them are over 7 millimeters in diameter, which is too large to pass. I am in agony around the clock and nothing relieves the pain. My right kidney was completely blocked and swollen and not draining into my bladder. I went to the emergency room last week after feeling dizzy and having a strange taste in my mouth. It turned out to be a kidney infection. I had a stent placed and spent 4 days in the hospital. I am now on antibiotics for sepsis. I will need at least 2 surgeries. While getting a computed tomography scan of my kidneys, they found a mass on my liver. They are concerned about it. I am 41 years old and feel like 81. I have 4 children, 2 of whom might not remember me if I died tomorrow. Drink plenty of water. Reduce coffee. Avoid alcohol. Eat healthy. I did this to myself. I hope everyone out there is okay. Story 12. I have given birth twice, both times unmedicated. Not a brag. I was petrified of the thought of an epidural. One birth was spontaneous. The other was induced. With the induced birth, she arrived before I was fully dilated. I had internal and external stitches up to my clitoral hood, which had to be repaired. I share this to point out that I have dealt with extreme pain. That was pain, but not the worst I have ever experienced. Hands down, pancreatitis. Holy fuck. That was excruciating. I legitimately thought something had ruptured inside me and that I was going to die. I sat in the emergency room for 8 hours, doubled over. Every breath felt like being stabbed over and over again before I was seen. Once they did my labs and an ultrasound and identified my pancreas, they immediately gave me narcotics. They said pancreatitis is one of those conditions where people come in screaming in pain or arrive by ambulance. They do not usually drive themselves to the emergency room and sit quietly in the waiting room. Story 13. When I found my husband dead in our bed, every part of me hurt, both physically and mentally. Story 14. Being in labor moment to moment is not much worse than the worst stomach cramps you have ever had. But the kicker is that there is nothing you can do to make it feel better, and you know it is only going to get worse. Second place is getting a grain of rice shoved all the way under my thumbnail. Story 15. Migraines and intrauterine device insertion with no pain management at age 18 after being told it wouldn't hurt much. Just a little pressure. Story 16. Gallstones cause pain that comes on suddenly, is constant and difficult to pinpoint, and then disappears within 1 to 3 hours. I had my gallbladder removed today and look forward to never feeling that pain. I would rather have contractions than experience gallstone pain. Story 17. I was induced at 22 weeks of pregnancy, knowing he would die during delivery because I did not have enough amniotic fluid for a viable pregnancy. This was 24 years ago this Halloween. The second was losing my husband when I was 34, and the third was losing my mother when I was 44. Story 18. I had a vasectomy. I discovered I have a high resistance to lidocaine during the cutting of the vas deferens. My scream woke the dead in their morgue. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. Story 19. Ovarian cyst rupture and living with chronic health conditions. Story 20. My friend of 20 years passed away last November. I have had cancer and lost an organ, but neither comes close in terms of pain, physical or otherwise. Story 21. I had been vomiting for hours. Once, when I vomited, my stomach literally twisted. I could feel it. I almost blacked out because the pain was so intense and my vision blurred. It was the worst pain I have ever experienced, worse than when my calf muscle was cut open. Story 22. I have chronic back pain. Sometimes the lower back tightens to the point where I lie in a fetal position, feeling desperate. It takes hours to move a few feet because each movement re-triggers the tightness. Usually it takes 3 to 4 days to subside. Story 23. I had malaria when I was in Burkina Faso. I don't feel bad about going to Africa. The people were amazing. I would probably choose a different anti-malarial medicine. No regrets. Story 24. I know it is going to sound silly, but once I was so badly constipated that I thought I would pass out. I had to go to the emergency room. Story 25. Someone did not believe me when I said I would be sexually assaulted. I still hate this person almost 44 years later. Story 26. 1. Passing stones. Easily the worst. The only time I have seriously given thought to ending my life. 2. Pulling my own teeth out. 3. Fishing a bullet out of my arm and sewing it up. 4. An ingrown toenail I cut and pulled out myself. 5. Finding out Firefly was cancelled. They took the sky from me. They stopped the signal, Mal. Story 27. Stingray sting and the practice of placing the affected area in near boiling water for an extended period. Story 28. They removed my upper jaw, rebuilt it, and stitched it back with wire mesh and a bone graft. Before that, they broke my lower jaw, rehinged and extended it using 4 screws. The surgery severed most of the nerves. I was a teenager. No one knew what would happen. I was the youngest person to receive this new experimental surgery. It was agony. I thought the bone-deep pain from the breaks, metal and swelling would be the worst I ever felt. Then the nerves began to regenerate. Younger patients have a greater ability for nerve recovery. Imagine the pins and needles feeling when your foot wakes up after falling asleep, amplified 1,000 times, constant and in your face, combined with the deep throbbing ache from bone saws and metal implants. It lasted only a few weeks, but it left me with a lifelong ability to fall asleep even when I am in pain. Story 29. For anyone with tooth pain or who might get it in the future, there is a pain treatment made by the Red Cross that works very well. It tastes terrible and burns if it touches your cheek or tongue, but it really stops the pain. I believe it is clove oil. The kit contains a small bottle of the oil, tiny tweezers, and small cotton balls. Swipe the cotton with the oil, hold the dipped cotton against the painful tooth, and the pain stops in seconds. Do not leave the cotton in your mouth. Dispose of it after use. I bought mine at Walgreens in the United States. Story 30. It is ironic that I broke my ankle so badly that they would have had to amputate my foot if they had not restructured it with a plate and screws almost immediately. The broken bones were going in all directions but did not puncture my skin. I was in so much emotional pain from being broken up with right before it happened and was suicidal, so the physical pain seemed trivial. I had surgery a few hours after I arrived at the hospital in an ambulance, and I had a nerve block, so I could not feel anything after I woke up. The recovery was surprisingly manageable in terms of physical pain. Almost a year later, I was sitting with my legs crossed, and suddenly it felt like a flaming hot knife cutting down the length of the incision on the outside of my ankle. I was alone. I moved my foot and ankle quickly to try to relieve the pain, and it subsided, though there was an echo of pain and soreness. That night it happened again while I was sleeping, and moving my ankle made it subside again. I was terrified for days and could not sleep. I was so afraid of that pain happening again, or worse, of it happening and not being able to stop it. I knew I would have to call 911 if that happened, because otherwise I would kill myself to escape the pain. Apparently, it is the steel plate on the outside of my right ankle pressing on a nerve. I have learned the signs that it is going to happen, so now I can change how I am sitting before it starts. Story 31. After contracting coronavirus disease 2019, I had a migraine for 7 days straight and a sore throat that felt like I was swallowing glass. My throat swelled so much that I could not eat or talk, and the pain took weeks to subside after I recovered. That was not a fun week. Story 32. The vasectomy was okay. Being jumped on afterward was not. Story 33. I had radiation treatment on my face for cancer. I would give 0 stars if I could and would not recommend it. Story 34. I have idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Too much cerebrospinal fluid is compressing my brain. They performed a lumbar puncture to check the pressure. It is supposed to be between 5 and 15, but mine was 40. The lumbar puncture site did not clot. All the cerebrospinal fluid drained into my abdomen. My brain's cushioning was gone. It is distended and has been partially pulled into my spinal canal. I cannot adequately put into words the pain of my brain screaming in agony. Story 35. I have had 7 bone marrow biopsies. I screamed each time. I had leukemia. I have undergone chemotherapy, immunotherapy, total body irradiation, and a stem cell transplant. I have also had 13 lumbar punctures. They are not that bad but are nerve-wracking. I do not like the thought of a needle so close to my spine. Story 36. I threw my back out while bending over to pick up a blanket. I crumpled to the floor in pain and could not get up for over an hour because the pain was so sharp whenever I tried. I army crawled up a set of stairs to get some Vicodin. Story 37. I received steroid injections, 1 on each side of my spine. The surgeon made a mistake on the left side and injected too close to the nerve. My entire left leg felt simultaneously on fire and crushed in a hydraulic press. It was horrible. Story 38. Had a reaction to my chemotherapy medication. Every inch of my body was on fire. I could not stand being touched, even lightly, and I could not bear weight to walk. My husband had to help me to the bathroom. I also broke out in hives, passed out, had no pulse, my oxygen saturation dropped to about 80%, and they could not get a blood pressure reading. I was given an epinephrine auto-injector. Apparently that is not a normal reaction to the medication, and there is not much they can do. Story 39. Severe inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, caused my worst flare-ups. I was vomiting and losing consciousness from the pain. I had my entire large bowel removed. After the surgery, I developed ileus, which means my small bowel was paralyzed, but I did not realize this until it was too late and I had eaten food. Trying to digest food with a paralyzed small bowel after having my large bowel removed was so painful that I have no memory of 6 full days in the hospital. When I regained consciousness, my mother told me I had been begging a nurse to kill me. Felt a bit dramatic in hindsight. Story 40. It was a toss-up between pancreatitis, being awake during abdominal surgery, and my mom dying of coronavirus disease 2019. If I had to pick one, I would say it was the grief. Couldn't eat for days. And yes, grief does cause physical pain. Story 41. Shingles attacked my brainstem, put me in the hospital for several days, and left me on home health care for a couple of months afterward. The waves of burning pain in my head were unbearable and lasted for several days. I developed Bell's palsy afterward and began to have symptoms on the other side of my face, which alarmed the doctors. Story 42. At 8 months pregnant, I developed a thrombosed hemorrhoid that had to be sliced open to relieve the pressure and pain. Between the bulging vein near my anus and the pressure of the baby, already over 8 pounds, with no local anesthetic injections and a knife incision on the hemorrhoid, I now have post-traumatic stress disorder. Story 43. I passed a 9mm kidney stone and a 7-pound 12-ounce baby at approximately the same time. Even with intravenous pain medication, I thought I was dying. Story 44. My answer to this question will always be shingles. Fuck shingles. Story 45. Recovering from childbirth with stitches that were too tight was horrendous. Once I got home and no longer had the stronger hospital pain medication, I was on my own all day with a newborn and could barely move without agony. I had been told that ibuprofen is not allowed during pregnancy, and I was not of sound mind enough to check whether that restriction applied while breastfeeding. After finally speaking to a doctor a week later, I took ibuprofen and could get down the hall to the toilet without crawling or trying not to scream, although actually using the toilet remained difficult. It was not until my stitches were removed after 11 days that I could stand upright and begin to move more normally. Everyone tells you about the pregnancy and then immediately starts talking about the baby. Nobody prepared me for the recovery period. Story 46. Diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome in 2017. Sometimes I use a rollator, crutches, or a wheelchair. It is not just one pain. I have daily pain and breakthrough pain. Severe burning like hot lava beneath the skin of both legs. Painful electrical shocks that feel like being hit with a stun gun or cattle prod. Agonizing spasms and bone-crushing pain. It is spreading throughout my body. I have a hospital bed in my bedroom. I try not to let it stop me, and I keep a sense of humor about it. Okay, maybe dark, twisted humor. It is my coping mechanism. I am 60 years old, and this condition is kicking my ass. But I am still that crazy liberal aunt with purple hair, tattoos, nose piercings, and a crazy cat lady. I have good days and bad days. I am not going down without a fight, though. Story 47. I broke my femur in a car accident. I remember the car hitting something and then feeling excruciating pain, like lava pouring over my skin and burning through my leg. I recalled bits and pieces after the impact. Apparently, I begged the firefighters to kill me as they pulled me from the wreckage. Story 48. I had a cyst surgically removed from my dominant hand. We asked about pain management. The nurse said they did not prescribe anything for that, handed me a Tylenol and sent me on my way. 2 days later, the medication that had kept my arm numb wore off, and I now know what a solid 7 on the pain scale feels like. I called the doctor's office to ask for something to be sent, and was told the nurse had lied to me and that a prescription was waiting at the pharmacy. My dad picked it up for me on his way home from work. I have no idea what happened with that nurse or why she told me they had not prescribed pain medication. Story 49. A nerve block went wrong. It felt like my inner thigh was being bitten by ants on fire and crushed at the same time. It went completely numb after a few hours while I cried and begged my parents to take me back to the hospital. They told me I was being dramatic and that a little pain was normal after surgery. I was not coherent enough to convince them otherwise because I was 11 and panicking. I still have diminished sensation in that area. It has been over 20 years. Story 50. I have given birth and had a colposcopy and a breast biopsy without anesthesia, but the poison from a run-in with a stingray traveling through my bloodstream was worse. The expected pain was brutal, but it intensified a billionfold when someone trying to help put my foot in ice water. I got immediate sweet relief after the long boat ride home when a nurse advised me to put my foot in the hottest water I could stand. Hot water cured it. Story 51. Sciatica. I cannot walk, I cannot sit, and I cannot lie down. Months of non-stop pain. I cannot do dishes, laundry, or even brush my teeth because leaning forward sends incredible pain down my legs and hips. I am dealing with a flare-up right now and I want to die. I have been hit by a car, attacked by a dog, suffered gallbladder attacks and had my gallbladder removed, had ablations and many surgeries. Sciatica tops them all. It is 10 times worse. Doctors and employers do not take it seriously. People who have not experienced it do not understand nerve pain. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in immediate danger, call emergency services now. If you are in the United States, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, contact your local emergency number or local crisis resources. Reach out to someone you trust or a mental health professional for help. Story 52. Herniated disc in the lower back. Despite having muscular back pain for decades, it was orders of magnitude worse. Story 53. My first bout of coronavirus disease 2019. Every muscle screamed when I moved in bed. I was actually crying when I tried to turn over. I was like this for 2 days. On the third day, I still had horrible pain, but I was used to it and did not cry every time I moved. I will never forget that pain. Every muscle in my body hurt. Story 54. My bowel perforated and I could not get to the hospital because of a blizzard. The pain was unbearable, and I developed sepsis and required an ostomy bag. I spent 12 days in the intensive care unit. I will never forget when they were finally able to give me pain relief. It was the best feeling in the world. I had reversal of the ostomy 12 months later, and I am doing fine now. I was just thankful it was reversible. Story 55. Crohn's disease flare-ups caused waves of pain and fever. Story 56. Sciatica. The only pain I have ever passed out from. It makes me feel like I am about to snap cleanly in half. Story 57. My child's head became stuck in my pelvis after 72 hours of unmedicated labor, and I required an emergency cesarean section to deliver him from my abdomen. The nurse refused to give me pain medication and only offered acetaminophen so I would not fall asleep after being awake for 3 days because I needed to feed my son every 30 minutes and record it on the feeding log. Story 58. I had severe encephalitis untreated for almost 8 weeks. The pain in my head felt skull-crushing and was by far the worst of all my symptoms, including vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, paralysis, psychosis, and hallucinations. It turned out that my meningeal dura mater was slowly popping from pressure buildup. I am lucky to be alive. Story 59. After giving birth, I had a bowel movement while severely dehydrated and was probably very close to a fecal impaction. Story 60. I had gallstones and an infected gallbladder that was misdiagnosed as gastroesophageal reflux disease. For months, I thought I had severe heartburn that became increasingly debilitating and lasted for hours at night. I restricted my diet because I never knew what would trigger an attack and lived in fear of eating. I was prescribed proton pump inhibitors and another medication I do not remember, and I went to urgent care several times. Eventually, the pain became unbearable. I was vomiting and panicked that the pain would never end. I went to the emergency room and had emergency surgery to remove my gallbladder. The surgeon said my gallbladder was so infected that the bile was like black sludge. The most recent painful experience was contracting coronavirus disease 2019 this summer. The first 7 days were mild, but then I developed a dry, relentless cough and complications from the infection that made coughing excruciating. The infection caused inflammation of the ribcage cartilage and affected the nerves at the back of my neck. Each cough caused muscle contractions that compressed my ribcage, producing intense shooting pain followed by nerve pain radiating down both arms and, in severe cases, throughout my body. The nerve pain made my arms weak so I could not even lift them after coughing. The cough felt like a postnasal tickle in the back of my throat, so I would just cough and cough. The pain was so intense I would cry. I went to the emergency room and to urgent care. I learned there is no medication that completely stops coughing, so I was given benzonatate, sold as Tessalin Pearls, and prescription cough syrup, and I was advised to try every available over-the-counter remedy for cough and pain. I barely slept for a week. I still experience health issues from the severe inflammation caused by coronavirus disease 2019, including brain fog, persistent fatigue, and worsening mental health. Story 61. Open heart surgery was about an 8 out of 10. The pain medication helped, but the first 2 days I would rather not have been conscious. What really made it worse was sneezing with a broken sternum. A rib that popped out of alignment stabbed me whenever I inhaled for 11 weeks. Also, I felt nerve endings dying across my chest and new ones growing in for 6 months. I would not recommend the whole experience. Do it only if you must, but try not to reach that point. Story 62. The day we found out our tabby cat had cancer in his chest, we did not know about it. It was inoperable, and there was nothing we could do except make him comfortable with hospice at home until a veterinarian could come to help us say goodbye. I could not stop shaking and felt a physical ache from the immediate terror and grief when our family veterinarian, who had cared for our pets for 12 years, walked in and said, "I am so sorry. I need to call the emergency clinic to take him now. This is not good. I think it is cancer, but I do not have the means to diagnose it properly at my non-emergency practice." The first day after we said goodbye, I got home from work and he did not run to greet me as he usually did. I collapsed on the dining room floor and cried, feeling like a failure as a cat mom because I had not noticed the cancer in his chest before it was too late. My husband and I were lucky enough to get his paw prints before he passed, and we had them tattooed on our wrists so I can remember him and imagine petting his paw pads whenever I want. Story 63. I had a lacerated cornea that fused to my eyelid and then tore when I tried to open my eye. It was not only painful but debilitating. Compared with other people's experiences, such as kidney stones, it is still my worst injury so far. Knock on wood. Story 64. Classic birth story. My first time wasn't bad at all. I didn't feel anything during labor and was just sore afterward. The second one, oh my God, was awful. I had an epidural both times, but for whatever reason my body contracted continuously for an hour and the epidural did nothing. If that had been my first, I would not have had a second. I am glad I am done. Laughing out loud. Story 65. An abscess tooth was the worst pain I have experienced. I gave birth to 2 children without pain medication and had multiple large kidney stones. Story 66. I woke up from surgery without enough pain medication. I have flashbacks of how terrible it felt. Story 67. Kidney stones feel like a broken-off corner of a razor blade slowly being dragged through your body. Story 68. I had chalazion removal from both eyes. Chalazia form from chronic styes and need to be removed. The injections to numb the area around my eyes were painful, and I felt tugging and slight pain during removal. I could not see for a week. I sobbed when I came out of the operating room. Story 69. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, posterior cruciate ligament, and both menisci in the same second. If you had told me I had just been kneecapped with a hammer, I would have believed you. Story 70. Probably will not be as bad as some others here, but dry socket is one of the worst pains a person could go through, and I would not even wish it on my enemy. Please get your teeth taken care of regularly. Do not wait until the pain starts. Story 71. A dirt bike accident lodged the end of a handlebar in my eye. It severely injured my eye, fractured my skull, and caused a concussion. It hurt like a motherfucker. Story 72. Endometriosis was discovered during my 3rd laparoscopic surgery. They found it on my ovaries, on my uterus including beneath it, along my ureter and kidneys, on my appendix and across my abdomen, and on nerves near my sacrum and the associated ligament. There were probably a few other locations I am forgetting. It is fucking terrible. I would take kidney stones over the pain and cramps from this. I have had kidney stones several times. Story 73. An ant bit my sister and me. I don't want to remember the suffering. I kept scratching my foot the whole time. The only solution was pouring hot water on it. A lot of ants were in our house, but luckily they left by themselves. Story 74. I was thrown from a horse and shattered my tailbone. There was nothing I could do but endure. I could not sit, walk, lie down, or sleep without excruciating pain. I had no pain medication except ibuprofen. I learned to sleep on my stomach because it was the only position that provided relief. I still have chronic pain there. It has been 11 years. Story 75. When I was a child, I had Lyme disease and was prescribed doxycycline, which made me very sensitive to the sun. That summer, I avoided the sun and used a lot of sunscreen, but I developed sunburns under all my fingernails and toenails. The first night was the worst pain I have ever felt, even worse than the pain from severed fingers. Story 76. I broke my heel. The injury was painful, but the surgery to fix it was 1,000 times worse. I had a double nerve block which did not seem to help. I woke up from anesthesia in the worst pain of my life. The recovery lasted 3 months. It has been 2 years and I still have daily pain and cannot run. 0 out of 10. I do not recommend it. Story 77. Motorcycle crash. There's something to be said about having a jaw broken in 3 places and trying to remove a full face helmet. Story 78. The period after my heart surgery and chest drainage was absolute hell. The pain was even worse than my deep infiltrating endometriosis. Story 79. Manual removal of the placenta after labor with no epidural or pain medication. I have had 5 abdominal surgeries and 4 foot surgeries. I would undergo them all again to avoid that experience. I passed out from the pain, lost 4 liters of blood, and could see and feel the doctor's hand through my abdomen. Story 80. Total bowel obstruction occurs when the body tries to expel material and finds an opening, even if it is the wrong one. Story 81. An intractable several-day migraine was so intense I became desperate and came close to banging my head against the wall. My husband stopped me. We compromised and he held my head and pressed and squeezed my temples firmly. Other migraines have left me in a fever dream, near hallucination, or fantasy of pulling my eye out. I have also hurt my own hand to distract myself from the head pain. Other people with migraines understand. This illness sometimes makes me feel insane. Story 82. My hip collapsed from avascular necrosis without warning. I was in horrible pain, moaning and almost screaming, and no one believed me because it happened out of the blue. I walked on a broken hip for a year and a half. Meanwhile, I underwent a litany of medical tests, the most painful of which was a bone marrow biopsy on the broken hip performed while I was awake. The sound of the needle drill entering my bone and the crunch from the chisel occurred inside my body and kind of rattled my teeth. I will never forget it. Story 83. Besides childbirth, getting a double mastectomy was pretty awful. Story 84. 1. I bent an acrylic nail back and it took my entire nail off with it. 2. Another nail-related and arguably worse incident. You know those buffer blocks you use to smooth and shine the top surface of your nail? I could not find mine, so, for an unknown reason, I decided to use a nail file thinking it would do the same job as the gentle spongy block. I was watching television and filing away without paying attention, when I suddenly experienced excruciating pain. I had filed through under my nail and made a hole in it. The blood and gore, one of those "what do I do now?" moments. I ended up putting about 5 bandages on it with a cotton pad under the first one, and let it regrow, which it did eventually. If anyone is thinking of doing this, please do not. 3. I was at a shisha bar in Ayia Napa and, for reasons I do not know, the waiter came over to do some tricks. He flicked a hot charcoal cube on top of the shisha tower into the air with a metal rod to perform a flip, and it landed on the top of my hand. I suffered a large burn that changed color over the duration of the holiday but now remains a tiny, almost undetectable scar, thanks to bio-oil. I have been in a car crash and had whiplash, but the above situations were far worse than the pain from that experience. Story 85. I tore my hamstring during a rehearsal. I couldn't even straighten my leg. I cried in the dressing room later, not so much from the pain itself but from what it meant, that I couldn't dance for weeks. Story 86. I'm currently nursing a wound on the bottom of my foot after stepping fully on a piece of upright glass. On the ball of my foot and the area above it. Super cool. Story 87. Undiagnosed interstitial cystitis, an extremely painful bladder disease. It felt like I was in labor for weeks. I have 3 children, so I know what labor feels like. I have 3 herniated discs in my back and have had multiple back surgeries. I contracted coronavirus disease 2019 about 4 times and have had meningitis. You name it, I probably had it. But interstitial cystitis is something I would not wish on anyone else, except perhaps those who support that orange turd. Story 88. I had the toenail of my big toe ripped off when I tripped over a dog gate. I landed on the floor screaming, not knowing why. Story 89. A urologist is inserting a camera through my urethra into my bladder. Story 90. A severed Achilles tendon occurred when a large framed painting swung like a pendulum and landed in the wrong spot. Story 91. The Ring of Fire during a non-medicated natural birth. Twice. Story 92. Having my dog collide with my knee at full speed, dislocating and breaking it at the same time, is probably one of my top 3 worst experiences. Story 93. I am at the emergency room. If someone replies so I can find it later, I will tell you. Story 94. I ran an ultramarathon of 50 kilometers after only 2 months of training. I was able to run about 26 kilometers before my legs shut down and I could no longer run. I could barely bend my knees. I ended up walking and waddling the remaining 24 kilometers while my legs were in that condition. I had agonizing knee pain for the next 2 days and could not sleep without ibuprofen. It was worth it. Story 95. A missed cat jump during my parkour days. I miscalculated the distance and ended up breaking my right knee, falling on my back, and damaging the discs between my 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae. Life has never been the same since, but I am grateful to be alive and able to move around. Story 96. I think many people underestimate tooth, mouth, and jaw pain can be debilitating. Story 97. When I was about 12, a saw blade struck my testicles. My dad had asked me to help hold something but had not tightened the blade properly, and it came loose and hit my testicles. Story 98. I'm going through opiate withdrawal while also having muscular dystrophy. The already intense pain from the muscular dystrophy was multiplied by 10,000 times. It seemed. It's funny. I got on them randomly when someone at work gave them to me for free. I never had to pay for them and it went on for 2 years. I then started taking this 7-OH stuff when the Percocet stopped working. They are significantly stronger than Percocet, a specific brand that I won't be sharing the name of. I'm pretty sure they had other stuff in them besides 7-OH because other brands with the same milligrams and everything wouldn't touch me. But this specific brand really messed me up. To be honest, I'm still on them because I couldn't do it. The pain was too much. All the areas I have atrophy in felt like they were on fire. I've never experienced pain like that in my entire life. On the bright side, I'm going to a pain clinic doctor next week. I told them the truth and everything over the phone. They mentioned Suboxone and Sublocade. I never thought I'd be here. Life is wild. Good luck to everyone. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.